I'm Justin Knott from Morgantown Christian Academy, and today I will be performing The Hunting of the Snark by Lewis Carroll. Just the place for a snark, the bellman cried as he landed his crew with care, supporting each man on the top of the tide by a finger entwined in his hair. Just the place for a snark. I've said it twice, that alone should encourage the crew. Just the place for a snark. I have said it thrice, but I tell you 3 times is true. The crew was complete. It included a boots, a maker of bonnets and hoods, a barrister brought to arrange their disputes, and a broker to value their goods. A billiard marker whose skill was immense might perhaps have won more than his share, but a banker engaged at enormous expense had the whole of their cash in his care. There was also a beaver that paced on the deck or would sit making lace in the bow, and it often, the bellman said, saved them from wreck, though none of the sailors knew how. There was one who was famed for the number of things he forgot when he entered the ship: his umbrella, his watch, all his jewels and his rings, and the clothes he had bought for the trip. The loss of his clothes hardly mattered because he had 7 coats on when he came, with 3 pairs of boots. But the worst of it was he had wholly forgotten his name. He would answer to "Hi," or any loud cry such as "Fry me," or "Treader my wig," to "What you may call him," or "What was his name?" but especially "Thingamajig." His form is ungainly, his intellect small, so the bellman would often remark, but his courage is perfect, and that, after all, is the thing that one needs with a snark. He came as a baker, but owned when too late, and it drove the poor bellman half mad. He could only bake bride cake, for which I may state no materials were to be had. The last of their crew needs a special remark, though he looked an incredible dunce. He had just one idea, but that one being Snark, the good bellman engaged him at once. He came as a butcher, but gravely declared when the ship had been sailing a week, he could only kill beavers. The bellman looked scared and was almost too frightened to speak. And so, ever after that sorrowful day, whenever the butcher was by, the beaver kept looking the opposite way and appeared unaccountably shy. The bellman himself, they all praised to the skies. Such a carriage, such ease, and such grace. Such solemnity, too. One could see he was wise from the moment one looked on his face. He bought a large map representing the sea without the least vestige of land, and the crew were much pleased when they found it to be a map they could all understand. Other maps are such shapes with their islands and capes, but we've got our brave captain to thank, so the crew would protest that he's bought us the best, a perfect and absolute blank. This was charming, no doubt, but they shortly found out that the captain they trusted so well had only one notion for crossing the ocean, and that was to tingle his bell. He was thoughtful and grave, but the orders he gave were enough to bewilder a crew. When he cried, "Steer to starboard, but keep her head larboard," what on earth was the helmsman to do? But the danger had passed. They had landed at last with their boxes, portmanteaus, and bags. Yet at first sight the crew were not pleased with the view, which consisted of chasms and crags. The bellman perceived that their spirits were low, and recited in musical tones some jokes he had kept for a season of woe, but the crew would do nothing but groan. He served out some grog with a liberal hand, and bade them sit down on the beach, and they could not but own that their captain looked grand as he stood and delivered his speech. "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears." They were all of them fond of quotations, so they drank to his health, and they gave him 3 cheers as he served out additional rations. "We have sailed many months, we have sailed many weeks, 4 weeks to the month you may mark, but never as yet, 'tis your captain who speaks, have we caught the least glimpse of a snark. Come, listen, my men, will I tell you again the 4 unmistakable marks by which you may know, wheresoever you go, the warranted, genuine snarks. Let us take them in order. The first is the taste, which is meager and hollow, but crisp, like a coat that is rather too tight in the waist, with the flavor of will-o'-the-wisp. Its habit of getting up late, you'll agree that it carries too far when I say that it frequently breakfasts at 5 o'clock tea and dines on the following day. The third is its slowness in taking a jest, should you happen to venture on one. It will sigh like a thing that is deeply distressed, and it always looks brave at a pun. The fourth is ambition, and next will be right to describe each particular batch, distinguishing those that have feathers and bite from those that have whiskers and scratch. For, although common starks do no manner of harm, yet I feel it my duty to say, some are boojums. The bellman broke off in alarm, for the baker had fainted away. They roused him with muffins. They roused him with ice. They roused him with mustard and cress. They roused him with jam and judicious advice. They set him conundrums to guess. When at length he sat up and was able to speak his sad story he offered to tell, then the bellman cried, "Silence! Not even a shriek!" and excitedly tingled his bell. A dear uncle of mine, after who I was named, remarked when I bade him farewell, "Oh, skip your dear uncle!" the bellman exclaimed as he angrily tingled his bell. He remarked to me then, said that mildest of men, "If your snark be a snark, that is right. Fetch it home by all means. You may serve it with greens, and it's handy for striking a light. You may seek it with thimbles, and seek it with care. You may hunt it with forks and hope. You may threaten its life with a railway share. You may charm it with smiles and soap. But, oh, beamish nephew, beware of the day if your snark be a boojum, for then you shall softly and suddenly vanish away, and never be met with again. It is this that oppresses my soul when I think of my uncle's last words, and my heart is as nothing so much as a bowl brimming over with quivering curds. I engage with a snark every night after dark in a dreamy, delirious fight. I serve it with greens in those shadowy scenes, and I use it for striking a light. But if I ever meet with a boojum that day, in a moment of this I am sure, I shall softly and suddenly vanish away, and the notion I cannot endure." "'Tis a pitiful tale," said the bellman, whose face had grown longer at every word. "But now that you've stated the whole of your case, more debate would be simply absurd. The rest of my speech," he explained to his men, "you shall hear when I've leisure to speak it. But the snark is at hand. Let me tell you again, 'tis your glorious duty to seek it. To seek it with thimbles, to seek it with care, to hunt it with forks and hope, to threaten its life with a railway share, to charm it with smiles and soap. For England expects I forbear to proceed. 'Tis a maxim tremendous, but trite, and you best begin packing the things that you need to rig yourselves out for the fight." Then the banker endorsed a blank check, which he crossed and changed his loose silver for notes. The baker with care combed his whiskers and hair and shook the dust out of his coats. The boots and the broker were sharpening his spade, each working the grindstone in turn. But the beaver went on making lace and displayed no interest in the concern, though the barrister tried to approve to its pride and vainly proceeded to cite a number of cases in which making laces had been proved an infringement of right. The maker of bonnets ferociously planned a novel arrangement of bows, while the billiard marker with quivering hand was chalking the tip of his nose. But the butcher turned nervous and dressed himself fine with yellow kid gloves and a ruff. Said he felt it exactly like going to dine, which the bellman declared was all stuff. "Be a man," said the bellman in wrath, as he heard the butcher beginning to sob. "Should we happen to meet with the Jub-Jub, that desperate bird, we shall need all our strength for the job." They sought it with thimbles and sought it with care. They pursued it with forks and hope. They threatened its life with a railway share. They charmed it with smiles and soap. They shuddered to think that the chase might fail, and the beaver, excited at last, went bounding along with the tip of its tail, for the daylight had nearly passed. "There's Thingamabob shouting," the bellman said. "He's shouting like mad. Only hark! He's waving his hands, he's wagging his head. He has certainly found a snark." They gazed in delight while the butcher exclaimed, "He was always a desperate wag." They beheld him, their baker, their hero unnamed, on top of a neighboring crag. "It's a snark!" was the sound that first came to their ears and seemed almost too good to be true. Then followed a torrent of laughter and cheers. Then the ominous words, "It's a boo!" Then silence. Some fancy they heard in the air, a weary and wondering sigh that sounded like jum. But the others declare it was merely a breeze that went by. In the midst of the word he was trying to say, in the midst of his laughter and glee, he had softly and suddenly vanished away. For the snark was a boojum, you see.